Have you ever really thought about bisexual representation in politics? We're going to dive into some sources you shared today that really highlight the experiences of bi-elected officials.
Yeah, it's some fascinating material. We've got two pieces from The Advocate to look at.
Okay.
One is a list, 35 bisexual politicians you should know. So that gives us a snapshot of who's out there now.
Right.
And the second is an opinion piece. We're the biggest queer group you never see.
Yeah.
It's time we change that. That one gives us more the broader context around bi-identity.
Got it. So for our listener who wants to get up to speed quickly, our mission here is really to understand, who these politicians are in the U.S. today, what parties they belong to, why their visibility matters.
And also touch on that bigger picture of bisexual identity and community engagement that the second article talks about.
Exactly. Okay, so let's jump in. The numbers themselves are pretty striking, aren't they?
They really are. The first article points out this huge increase in out bisexual officials. Back in 2012, the Advocate apparently only found 6.
Only 6?
Yeah. And now, the LGBTQ plus Victory Fund counts over 130. State, local, federal levels.
That's a massive shift in just, what, a decade or so?
Absolutely. It really shows a definite trend towards greater visibility.
And it's important to remember the folks who paved the way, right? The article mentions some pioneers no longer in office.
Right, like Kate Brown. She was governor of Oregon, the first out bi governor ever in the U.S. That's huge.
Definitely. And who else?
There is Angie Buell O'Donnell, former state senator in South Dakota, and Evelyn Mantilla in Connecticut. She's thought to be the very first out bi state legislator.
Knowing that history really helps frame where we are now, doesn't it?
It does. It provides that crucial context.
Okay, so turning to who's serving now. The article gives a pretty wide-ranging list. At the federal level, there's Senator Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona.
She's currently the only out bisexual person in the entire U.S. Congress. It's, quite something.
Yeah.
The article notes she was the first out bi person elected to the House and the Senate. Pioneer status there.
Right. And it also touches on how her politics, especially since becoming an independent, haven't always sat well with everyone.
Yeah, I was mentioned some disappointment there from certain groups. But focusing just on her identity, she holds that unique position federally.
Okay. And then when we look at the state level, wow, the list is long. It really shows representation across a lot of different states.
It's genuinely impressive when you see them listed out. What kind of strikes you about that list?
Well, just the sheer number, obviously, but also the diversity within that group. Men, women, non-binary folks, cisgender, transgender, various ethnic backgrounds.
Right.
And it's interesting that the article highlights mostly Democrats, like Melody Hernandez in Arizona. She's a paramedic working on support for 911 dispatchers.
Yeah, and Alex Lee in California, first out by legislator there, youngest Asian American legislator too, focused on things like housing, criminal justice.
It seems like there's a real breadth of issues being tackled.
Definitely. You've got folks in Colorado, Iowa. Liz Bennett in Iowa, first queer woman in their legislature, now in the Senate. Big advocate for LGBTQ plus equality, reproductive rights.
And Heather Meyer in Kansas, pushing for LGBTQ plus rights, non-binary ID markers.
Maine has several. Lydia Crafts, Amy Roeder, Charles Skold, who's noted for standing up against anti-LGBTQ plus efforts specifically.
Right. Michigan, too, Lori Pahutsky and Emily Divendorf. Divendorf is the first non-binary person in the Michigan legislature, I think.
That's what the article says, yeah.
Yeah.
Both working on progressive issues.
And Minnesota has a few as well. Zach Stevenson, who apparently came out partly to help others.
Alongside Liz Rayer and Jessica Hansen.
Yeah.
Then you look at Montana, Andrea Olson in the Senate, speaking out against anti-LGBTQ plus bills, and Zooey Zephyr in the House.
Ah, yes. Zooey Zephyr, a bi-trans woman. She's been very vocal against anti-trans law.
Exactly. Just keep going. Nebraska, Megan Hunt, first out LGBTQ plus person elected there. Nevada, New Hampshire. James Rosner in New Hampshire, the first out trans man in any state legislature.
Wow, that's another significant growth.
Focusing on reproductive rights, education. Then North Carolina, Cecil Brockman, who came out after a homophobic incident, now fighting for LGBTQ plus rights.
It's quite a list. Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, several there too, including Ismail Izzy Smith Waydell, who's bi and non-binary.
Right. Another first there is a first non-binary member of the PA House. Rhode Island, Texas. Aaron Zweiner in Texas, part of that group fighting anti-LGBTQ plus legislation there.
Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, Wisconsin. The list in the article is really extensive. It paints a picture of a growing and active presence across the country.
It really does. And that brings us nicely to the second article, the opinion piece. We're the biggest queer group you never see. It adds a
Oh,
different layer to this.
how so?
Well, it's nice with this kind of startling fact that bi-plus people are actually the largest single group within the LGBTQ plus community.
Really? Larger than gay men or lesbians?
According to a 2024 Pew Research study cited in the piece, 4% of U.S. adults identify as bisexual versus 3% lesbian gay and about 1.6% trans non-binary.
Huh. That feels counterintuitive somehow, or at least not the common perception.
Exactly, and that's the core of the article, this idea of being hidden in plain sight.
Why hidden? What are the reasons given?
Well, a big one is just this sort of default assumption of heterosexuality.
Hmm.
If a bi person is in a relationship that looks straight from the outside, people often just assume they're straight.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
And the article also mentions that, historically at least, bisexual people have higher rates of being closeted. To quote some 2017 stats, like 26% weren't out to anyone important, only 19% were out to most people.
So even though the numbers are large, the visibility might be lower because of those factors.
Precisely, which ties into another point the author makes, this feeling of being lost between straight and gay spaces.
Right, like not having as many dedicated community spaces, specifically for bi folks, compared to maybe gay or lesbian communities.
Yeah, that unique challenge of finding your community when you don't fit neatly into those other boxes sometimes.
But the piece also points out that despite those internal community dynamics, society often just lumps everyone non-straight or non-cisgender together as queer, right?
Mm-hmm. And that, the author argues, makes solidarity really important, especially when facing external opposition or, oppressive legislation.
Okay. And the author talks about this element of surprise or being able to fly under the radar sometimes.
Yeah, that can come with bisexuality because of those assumptions we mentioned. But the main thrust isn't about hiding. It's a call for more mobilization, more engagement, more community building, especially given the political climate the author was writing in.
And there's a historical connection mentioned too, something about symbols.
Right. The article briefly touches on how bisexual activism is tied into broader queer resistance history. Mentions the biangle symbol having roots alongside the pink triangle, and the bi flag colors also descending from symbols of resistance to fascism and hate.
So there's a deep history there of being part of the struggle.
Definitely. It's not a separate thing, historically speaking.
Okay, so pulling these two threads together, the growing number of politicians from the first article and this context about bi identity and community from the second. What are the main takeaways for our listener?
Well, I think first, it's clear that bisexual representation in U.S. politics is real, it's significant, and it's growing. That list of over 130 officials is proof of that.
And the 35 Politicians article gives a good look at many of those currently serving. It's also pretty clear from that specific source that the trend of being openly bi seems more prominent among Democrats and, well, the one independent, Senator Sinema.
Yes, that's what this particular material highlights. In connecting to the second article, this increased political visibility could potentially counteract that hidden in plain sight phenomenon.
Yeah, it could foster a stronger sense of community, maybe, both within the LGBTQ plus world and just generally. Seeing yourself represented in halls of power matters.
Absolutely. Now, regarding the initial query about Republican politicians identifying as bisexual,
Right.
it's important to be clear that the sources we dove into today don't actually provide information or explanation on that specific point.
Yeah, based purely on the advocate articles here, the pattern observed is concentrated elsewhere politically.
Mm.
So that question about why Republican politicians might identify as bi isn't something this material addresses.
Correct. That would definitely require looking at different sources, perhaps doing more research if that's a specific area of interest.
Definitely food for thought there, maybe an area for further exploration.
For sure. It raises interesting questions about how identity intersects with political affiliation, which these articles touch on but don't fully explore across the entire spectrum.
So wrapping up, the increasing visibility of bi politicians, predominantly Democrats, and an independent in these sources really prompts us to think about representation, identity, and how LGBTQ plus activism is evolving.
And considering bi-plus people are the largest group within the queer community, their experiences and engagement are undoubtedly going to keep shaping the political and social landscape.
We hope this deep dive gave you a valuable look into the info you shared. What parts of this stood out most to you? And, what other questions does this raise for you about bisexuality in politics?